Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of this week's People Progressing Podcast. And I'm really excited to have Heather Younger on. I am just so fortunate that you came on, Heather. I am just enthralled with your work and what you're doing for people and what you're doing for leadership and so forth. It's utterly amazing to me. And I'm just so excited to have a conversation about it today. And this is going to be really inspiring for a lot of people. So the first thing I always do, Heather, is ask my guests when they come on, like where you grew up, what you like to do as a kid, what kind of influences you had growing up, and kind of what led you into the journey that you're on now.
See, I'm an only child, and I'm originally from Ohio. And when I was about 10 years old, my parents decided to move us to Las Vegas, and I had a huge influence there. No, that's Las Vegas, Nevada, not Las Vegas, New Mexico.
Yeah, I've been there too.
Um, and so I would say, like, one of the things I discovered there, this is back when there really weren't a lot of suburbs. It was like you lived in Las Vegas in the central part. There weren't a lot of things going on, but when I growing up in that area, I realized the kind of life, like the place I didn't want to raise my kids. And I realized, the kind of things I didn't want to be doing just as much as the things I did want to be doing. I went to UNLV for college, and neither one of my parents finished college. So I would have been just the first to do that. And I decided pretty early on, because of an influence of my grandmother, my mom on my mom's side, to go to law school. And so
Oh,
I have a law degree, and I went to law school and graduated, passed the bar, all those things, and then practiced for a couple of years and decided I hated it. I really hated it. I hated it because there was so much like research and like detail work and law libraries, and I was like, oh gosh, this is not me. I liked the part of marketing, and so I loved like going to meet people and bringing people into the firm. I just hated doing the work when they got there. Which just it explains a lot. I can tell you
yeah,
that for sure.
yeah.
But what I love doing, I would say, like my very favorite thing as a kid, I can remember when the trees would the leaves would fall from the trees, particularly in Vegas. I remember this because it was like they would be like crunchy, and I remember just like walking over those leaves and just hearing the crunch and feeling it on the bottom of my feet. To this day, I'm kind of like, I like the earthy settles me, it calms me. So if I need
Yeah.
to like go outside or go for a walk or take a dog a walk or whatever it is, go put my feet on the grass, it really helps me. And I was a tomboy. So I played around with, like, there was just other people, a lot of times guys playing like cars, going up trees. And I still to this day, I feel like I have four children, and three of them are boys. And so I call them my crew. And so for me, like hanging with the boys is a fun thing to do, where
Yeah.
like maybe other people might want to go shopping and do other kind of things. As a girl, I always want to do the boy things. So yeah, that's me.
So you got into this journey of leadership. You're also an author of three really powerful books that are really helping people. How did that come about? How did that journey of leadership and listening and in that the journey that you're on now, how did that all come about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so kind of segue out of the law, and was working in customer experience, large account management, and I there was one of my last roles before I transitioned. It's like I was still in customer experience, and I also had a sales role, and I had a legal role at this particular place. And I saw the power of listening to the customers, to the customers who we already had, to the people who were thinking about coming on, and listening in very particular ways. And so that my eyes were really open there. I had been leading people for a long time. I don't want to date myself, but I'd been a manager of teams for a very long time. Had always done pretty well at like being the voice, like all the things I talk about is kind of an embodiment of who I am. So I kind of had already been doing a pretty good job at that. Was I perfect at it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But I had just had a particular strength in those areas with empathy, compassion, listening. Like those are just my things, right? So so I'm working at this firm, at this company, and I decided I'm going to move on because I see another opportunity to have a larger reach and customer experience for the whole organization instead of like just one silo in an organization. So I go work for this tech company. Well, it was a company that wasn't a tech company when I first started, but they were morphing into they're going to have a merger of companies that was going to create kind of this tech arm of this company. And I had this sense that they might do a layoff, and that there was, do the merger. And I know I probably was going to be impacted, and I was. And it
Yeah.
was in this merger where the culture was going downhill, and nobody was like really listening to the customers about new product rollouts. No one was really even asking. No one was really paying attention to the signs inside the culture of what was happening with the employees. And people were coming to me going, "What the heck is going on?" I don't know, something's just not right. And why aren't the managers and the leadership telling me what's going on? And so there was fear and mistrust. So I had already acted kind of like a culture ambassador, and I went to the head of HR and I said, we really need to do something. Like the fear right now, the mistrust, it's palpable. It's like thick, man, knee deep.
Yeah.
And I said, we really need to do something about it. And she said, you're right. You should go do something about that. And I was like, wait, what? I lead customer experience, like not HR. I mean, that's what I was thinking at that time,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I was already acting kind of informally that way. So I took up on the offer, created an employee engagement council, decided I would bring these people together, asking the people who had already come to me, like as looking to me as a source, saying, hey, would you like to be the change that we're seeking? So we created a council trying to figure out how we can create more connectedness in the culture, reduce some of the fear that was there. And we started to do things that really did kind of create less of a fear. I wouldn't say there's no fear, because people still sense there were layoffs coming, but there was less of it. We could see more connection happening. And there were layoffs, and I was one of the, like in the first round of 200 people, and it was an owie. But I realized right in the moment, though, that the work I needed to be doing was to be the kind of that bridge between what the organizations weren't doing as that relates to customers and employees and their voices, and using that kind of to drive strategy forward, to really make sure that things could move forward in a positive direction of the culture. And so that's what we did. I decided that was the work I needed to do, and that's where I'm at now.
Why is that so important for you? Why is not just you, but other people in your organization and these organizations you work with, why is that it's so important that there's a good culture there for people to work in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is it's a drag. I mean, I felt my own self being dragged down by the negative sentiment, and I had to do something about it. I was going a little bit out of my mind, to be honest, with what was happening. And I was really going negative, and I was going low, and it wasn't good. And so if you can't live like that, and especially because you spend so many hours at work, we got to, try to create more fruitful places where people feel like it doesn't have to be like home or like a family, but it needs to feel like purpose is being done there. Like people have meaning there, and that they're
Yeah.
being uplifted, and that they're helping some bigger cause. And so I knew that from managing people for a long time and being that kind of person. And I just, I knew I was the person too who could be a catalyst for that. And there are plenty of others out there that can do it too. I just happen to be one of them.
Yeah, but you're one of them who acts on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say that. And I want to go back to something you just said. You said, I want to make sure people come to work that to have a purpose that means something, that has a greater good. I have a saying that you find your purpose when your purpose is greater than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of companies, what happens is people come to work and they don't have that purpose that's greater than themselves to go there. They don't see how they're helping the greater good. And I think it's part of the leader's position or job to help their people that they're leading understand what you're doing is helping this sector or helping these people or helping this, something that's greater than yourself, so that those people have something to come to work for.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think that's really important for leaders to do that. When you are on this journey of your leadership training and so forth, when did it click for you to help leaders understand their purpose in being a leader?
After I started doing some coaching, some executive coaching, which it's not my main thing. I have just a couple clients I keep. I don't market that anymore. So that's not, I want people to
Yeah,
think I'm marketing a service, because
yeah,
I am not marketing coaching. But I started to do that. And when I started to coach executives over a few year period, I started to see they became less demonized to me. So when you're like mid-level or you're lower, you don't know what's happening up there, partly because they're not transparent enough to tell you. And
yeah,
so that's a problem, or vulnerable enough to tell you.
yeah,
So that could
right.
be an issue, right? But part of it is just like there's just stuff you're not going to know because you have to do your day-to-day stuff. So when I started to coach them, I started to see I saw like their struggles, and I saw things that were unique to their positions that maybe I or other people may not have been privy to, because we weren't sitting at the board level. We didn't see the strategic context, those kinds of things. And so I got more context, and I had more empathy for their unique causes, and it helped me then be able to say, you know what? I think it's actually them, because when I think about the choices they're making, the things they're grappling with, the things they do are decide what budgets are going to be in place, which projects will move forward, who's going to be hired at the executive levels, who's going to be fired at the executive levels. Basically, it's like that's, and so I realized, because they were the triggers and they were the point, the turning points for organizations, that I needed to be talking to them and spending a lot of time getting into their hearts, through their minds often, to change them so they can then hopefully go forward with courage to change their own cultures.
Wow. You've used the word empathy a couple times already. I think empathy is the strongest word in the English language. I just think it's so powerful. And I explain empathy like this. I think empathy makes you act. Sympathy makes you feel. And I think when you're talking about empathy, it just hit me like a ton of bricks right there. You said, I really listen to what these leaders are going through, because most of us don't really understand what they're going through. So the first step in helping leaders, or helping leaders become better, is to understand where their leaders are actually coming from, what their issues are, what they're dealing with on a daily basis. How hard is it to get leaders? It doesn't matter if it's athletics, business, family leaders, whatever it is, to get into their purpose of why they're leading.
Some have a very clear purpose and some don't. And so it's for me, what in the past, and just the few that I still work with, it's helping them literally like draw that out, and write it down, and for us to discuss what that is and talk about the early times. And I'd see my job in life is to move people from the head to the heart, which is why my podcast is called Leadership of the Heart, which is why I write books on caring, leadership, and listening.
Yeah.
And that is because I need to move you from your head to your heart. It's through the heart that I think much of our movement, relationships, progress comes from. But if we don't do that, if we just stay in our heads, I'm not saying we shouldn't be in our heads ever. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that if we don't make the connection between head and heart, the decisions will be short-sighted as it relates to the people that drive that vision forward.
Yeah. And I look at it, when you talk about empathy again, and you're talking about leading from the heart, again, very powerful. How much do you find in leadership, people don't have empathy within their leadership? They don't lead from the heart because they don't have that empathy. I think leading with empathy leads to leading from the heart.
Yeah, and also one of the things I've really learned in these last probably 4 years is that empathy and compassion are not the same thing. Empathy
Right.
is sensing the needs of another.
Right.
The action that comes after is compassion. And so I look at empathy and compassion as like that double elixir for creating deeper relationships at work, and creating more of a magnetic culture and magnetic leadership when we combine the two. If you have empathy alone, the sensing of another person's needs, and you don't do anything about it, which is counter to anything I profess, then it's actually rather empty, to be honest. So I just want to make sure I say that. I think that there are some people who naturally have more empathy than others. I do think that everyone can learn it. And I also think many people have it, but don't know how to access it. They're afraid to, they don't know how to, they don't recognize it. So, I've really spent a lot of my time, and we do work on that, helping leadership teams understand the empathy they have, what they don't have, the gaps they don't have, helping them get, grow in it. But at the same time, having them understand that you can empathize all day. You can say, I feel you. Gosh, I could see how that's hard. And you can just stop right there. And in that case, sometimes that could be all you need, and that could be the compassionate act they're looking for. But oftentimes they want the people that are with you, across from you, look to you for guidance. They want more than just you hearing them. Sometimes they want you to do something about it. And that's where the compassionate action comes in.
I love that. My analogy in that is I drive into a grocery store, and there was a man and his wife and 2 kids standing there with a sign, and the man had a sign that said, "Lost my job, please, anything you can do to help would be great." And I drive in, and sympathy would make me say, man, I feel bad for that person. I can't believe he's going through that with his family. I drive in, I park my car, I go in and get my groceries, I come out, and I drive out the other way so I don't have to drive by him again. Empathy, and now you're talking about compassion. This is I think this is really powerful. Empathy says, I drive in, I think, man, what if that was me? What if I was standing there holding a sign with my wife and 2 kids or 3 kids standing there, and I lost my job and I'm trying to get food for my kids and so forth. I park, I go in, and maybe I buy 2 extra loaves of bread and a jar of peanut butter and jelly. And on the way out, now you're talking about the compassion part is I've now acted because on the way out, I drive by them, I hand them the bread and the peanut butter and jelly, and I drive away. The empathy helped me act on how I'm feeling towards those people. And you're talking about the action is the compassion part. The action part is the compassion part. I love that.
So compassion is basically going out of your way to relieve the pain of another person.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what that is. And I would argue that there's a lot that goes in between empathy and compassion, and oftentimes we actually assume what the action is that we need to take. And so what I'm going to argue is that instead of it just being, I think it's great. The example that you said is great because you could ask them and they'd say, we need $20, we need money instead of the food. In this case, I think that was a compassionate action, but like overarchingly, we should find out what people expect from us before we go act.
Oh, wow.
Because sometimes they know better or they want something more specific and we go do another thing and either it's not the right thing so it doesn't quite meet their need or it goollygops it, like it makes it worse than it was to begin with because we took the wrong action that wasn't directed at the real pain. So taking that time to spend more time with someone to really get to the bottom of what their pain is, the root cause of their pain, then when we go in we can be kind of diagnostic with our compassionate action.
So would that be simply asking them, Heather?
I would say it could be asking, it could just be like, let me learn more. And then
Okay.
at the actually get to the end say, I don't know, here's I'm thinking of I'd like to help you. And here's what I'm thinking I'm gonna probably do. But tell me, do you think that's what you're looking for or that would help? And they'll
Yeah.
say, oh, that would really, really help. Or they could say, not quite. Here's what I was kind of thinking I'd want you to do. But if you went ahead and did the other thing, it may not again relieve the pain or fix the need that they have. So it's just trying to go deeper. It's us taking that, it's going into that discomfort, just being real humans to each other, and be willing to like get to the thing we don't even know the answer to.
Yeah. I love
In
that.
law, and in law, they taught me never ask a question you don't know the answer to. And I'm going to be honest, I call BS on that.
Yeah.
I call BS on that in the human context. Obviously, when you're in the courtroom, it's different, but in the human
Right.
context,
Right.
I'm going to have to be comfortable asking the questions I don't know the answer to. In fact, I need to know your answer, and I don't care if it hurts me, makes me uncomfortable. I need to know the answer in order for me to solve for that issue. And the reason why I do that, it's not just to be all squishy gushy and this like great heart-based person. Heart-based people get results. So it's like
Right. Right.
to ask the customer what it is they really need, what the real pain is, or the prospect. When we get to the bottom of that and they know they have been heard and understood by us, they choose us. They choose us.
Yeah.
So it's direct correlation. I guarantee you it's happened over and over again.
So what do you say to a leader who says, running this company or running this team or running this organization, I don't really have time to sit down with my people and ask them those kind of questions and stuff. I just don't have the time to do that. I got to get this done. I got to get my budget done. I got to get this done. And these people are adults and they got to be able to handle this stuff on their own when we hire them. And what would you say to somebody like that?
I would say on one side, I agree. I agree to the extent that like if you hire the right people and you put them in the right places, they should be able to do
Right.
the job they're set to do. On the other hand, I'd say you can't afford not to, and you better make the time. You better make the time because the things you want to move forward are done more in large part by humans. And if you aren't listening to them, meeting their needs, going deep
Yeah.
with them, you're not going to get those things done. So just
Right.
go ahead and go. You just set that thought aside and make the time.
Yeah. And it's probably not as much, it's not as much time as people think. I ask the leaders I work with all the time, are you a people leader or a data leader? And what's giving you the data? It's the people. So you better be a people leader and you better care about them and you better empathize with them and you better respect them and you better want them to grow. I as you know, I coached for 30 years and still coaching today now in the business world, but in supporting people. I always did it for one reason, to get them ready, get my people ready 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years from when I was with them. to help them be good husbands, fathers, you know, workers, employees, business owners, community members, those kind of things. And if I could have a piece in that, that then I did my job. I don't think that should be any different for a business leader. If I'm a business leader and I have an employee and I have them under my wing and I'm trying to help them grow and progress, 10 years down the road, if they're now the CEO of another company, but I had a good piece of that in terms of how I help that person grow and progress, I've done my job as a leader. And I think people overlook that. I don't know if I want to say responsibility, or I guess I would say it this way. I think people overlook that opportunity that they have to be that kind of a blessing in people's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
I agree.
When you're doing your keynote speeches and everything, and people believe me, she's dynamic. You need to hire Heather to come out and do your speaking.
Thanks, Joe.
How much does listening play a part? I want to get into your listening because you just wrote a book, The Art of Active Listening. In leadership, is that one of your main components of being a great leader, is being an active listener, being a great listener?
Mm-hmm. It is. I mean, so the previous book was The Art of Caring Leadership, and in that book there were 9 behaviors based upon all the research I'd done with other leaders and with employees and in surveys. And so I came up with 9 behaviors, and one of those behaviors was creating a culture of listening. I drilled down into that in this last book because I do think that's the crux of a good leadership. And what I mean by that is anything that's a goal of yours, whether it's better brand loyalty, you want to have better profits, profitability, revenue, you want to have employee, engagement, I don't know, whatever you want to have, board happiness, you want to have partner level connection, whatever you want. You can't get that if you aren't listening. And I mean, that's like listening with your ears, listening with your heart, listening with your, right? It's all of the senses. And so I do think that it really is a critical component of leadership.
I think I try to tell people, listen with intrigue. People are intriguing. Their stories are intriguing. And I tell people, learn to listen so you can listen to learn. Because you can learn so much from people. You can get so much from people. People are so interesting, their stories, their backgrounds, the things that they can bring to the table to make your organization better are all right there if you just listen. I believe, Heather, one of the biggest challenges of listening is for leaders is this. Leaders, coaches, business execs, whatever it might be, like to fix things. So if I'm sitting here having a one-to-one conversation with Heather, and I'm trying to listen to Heather and what she's telling me and what some issues are and what she's going through and all those kind of things, my first inclination is to jump to fix it mode or coach it mode, solve it mode right away. And what I don't do is I don't actively listen to Heather all the way through, because in my mind, I'm already trying to fix it. I'm trying to coach it. I'm trying to solve it. So I miss out on a lot of things that you have said to me because my mind is now not present with what you're saying. And if people would just learn to listen and listen all the way through, they'll realize that most of the time, the person that has the issue or the problem will end up solving that problem themselves most of the time, because they're going to talk themselves through it with you listening to them.
Mm-hmm. And you're asking good questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're listening, you have to ask good questions too. I mean,
yeah.
like people say, well, when you listen, your mouth should be shut. And it's like, not quite. Not quite. Should be shut while they're talking. And then you need to be opening it and asking the right questions that show that you were listening.
Right.
You're not asking questions by repeating it back exactly what you heard. I'm just going to quash that right now.
Yeah. I've heard that a lot. Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah.
Stop parroting people.
Yeah.
We need to paraphrase. We need to
Yeah.
paraphrase,
Yeah.
and we need to summarize, and we need to make sure that the paraphrasing and the summarization includes what we see and hear and feel about what they've said to us. So we need to dig deep into even that feeling side of things. When we do that, here's an example. So someone tells you, let's say you're a leader, manager, whatever, and one of your team members comes to you and is sharing with you, something. It could be something personal that's stopping them from performing at work. And you could sense like there's a lot of there's tension, there's fear, there's all these different emotions that maybe that is loaded into the story they're telling you. So number one, good enough, kudos to you that you actually sat and heard the story, because a lot of people don't even do that. But you sat and listened to them, and then you say, oh my gosh, Joe, I had like no idea you were going through that your mom was having that issue,
Right.
and that your brother had had cancer, and that I didn't realize that was stopping. And I can see how that's got you really up in arms, and that it's hard to focus. So you see, it's different. It's like I'm encapsulating kind of what they said, not in every word, but also how they're feeling about what they said. That's the process you have to go through in order for people to realize that you really are starting to get them.
Yeah, and they feel valued.
Mm-hmm.
They feel important. They feel like you care.
Yeah.
Um, how do you help people with that, Heather? How do you help people be more present in listening with other people? How do you have some strategies that can possibly help people with better listening so they can be more present with people?
Well, I mean, I think some of them are, you said, like, this is not anything very new, but it's not common practice. It's a whole idea of just really, there's a couple things. And one of them is getting rid of the distractions. I mean, gosh, the phones, the emails, the Slack
Right.
messages, particularly on Zoom. If you're in person, it's the same thing. You still are seeing and hearing the things. So if you're going to enter into a discussion with somebody, turn off all those dang notifications, so you just don't have to hear them, because it's too tempting. It's tempting. It's almost impossible. The dang phone companies and all these different technologies have made us addicted to them. So, but if we can turn them off while we're having the discussions, we now have really minimized the things that get in the way of us being present. The other thing is, just mindfulness generally, kind of centering yourself into what's your purpose for entering into the discussion. Those are a couple big things that you have to do if you want to really be listening to somebody. And I mean, really listening.
Yeah, and mine is just have a growth mindset. Right.
Mm-hmm.
When I get a chance to talk with Heather, it's so intriguing for me because I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow from it. And even if it's talking about, you know, like you were talking about problems, somebody in the family has cancer and my mind's halfway there and halfway at work and everything else. I want to learn about that stuff because people matter to me. I care about you as a person first, an employee second. And I want to make sure that you're doing okay because I want it to be a good experience for you to come in here every day. So I need to, again, be present with you at all times. Um, this is great stuff. I want to go back to your first book. Was your first book the leadership book, the caring
Well,
leadership book?
no. The first one is the 7 Intuitive Laws of Employee Loyalty.
Okay, and I kind of want to touch on that. I wanted to go with your leadership book next, The Art of Caring Leadership. You said you did a lot of research, and that's what I love about your stuff is it's all based on some research and interviews with people and so forth. And you came up with nine strategies or nine core values of the things. Can you dive into a couple of those? I know we probably don't have time to do all nine of them, but people could get your book to do that. But what are a couple of them? I ask people this all the time. What are your main things of leadership, like your top three things to be a good leader? So it's kind of like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
why don't you dive into that a little
Well,
bit?
the first one is self-leadership. And I
Oh,
break
wow.
self-leadership down into kind of like 8 or 9 subcomponents based upon all the research I've done, all the people I've interviewed. Self-leadership is most important. You cannot lead others if you don't lead yourself first. You cannot care for others if you don't care for you first.
Yeah.
And so what often happens is, if not, we're left feeling depleted, and we like, basically, I always tell people we're giving people from empty. So we have a cup and we fill it up, or we don't. And if we don't, we give from an empty cup to other people. And then what does it feel like to the people on the other end to give from empty? So, some ways to do that are like obviously self-care and having that growth mindset to be skilling yourself up nonstop to get better at different things. Making sure that you're congruent with what you say you value and evaluating that and doing like an exam of that often. So those are some of the kind of sub things under self-leadership. Another thing is obviously making them feel important. So that's going to be like the recognition and the purposeful connection, one-on-one meetings, things like that. Those are going to be some important things to do. Another one is psychological safety or safe spaces, creating safe spaces for them to speak their truth and normalizing the truth that is spoken and making them feel comfortable doing it, even maybe recognizing them for doing it and not ridiculing them and making them feel smaller as a result. Those are a few things. There's a lot there. I would definitely tell you that the Caring Leadership book has some legs to it. a lot of people are, I mean, a lot of folks really, really love that, just the concept, the content, the takeaways. So the art of carrying leadership is a really good one to put your hands on. This listening one, like I said, is smaller and it's mostly me. There's some research in it, of course, but it's not as many voices. The last one, in carrying leadership, it had like 80 different voices in it. Lots of people I'd interviewed in it. And this last one was mostly just like, there were some, but mostly me and my stories and the research and the scenarios and the 5-part framework for how to listen well and things like that.
Now, I want to go back something really quick. When we first started, you said you got into law and you had to do a lot of research and all that kind of stuff, and it just wasn't your cup of tea. But this kind of research is your cup of tea.
Yep.
So you do like to research, but you
Yep.
just like to research things that you have a passion for.
Yeah. Well, what it is that if I have to do something I don't love, but it's for the sake or the benefit of others who will get value from it, or their lives will change because of it, then I will do it. So I have my firm is called Employee Fanatics, and that is the X part, the IX part is because we are founded in metrics and data. We help organizations get a hold of their data, their metrics, their voices, quantitative, qualitative, and we help them kind of corral it, figure out what are the next steps to do to continue to get buy-in from the team members and move forward on that path of kind of informed strategic decisions. And yeah, I love it. I love the work I do, and I'll research that and all day, every day, because it's going to help employees. Yeah,
Isn't that something? You said something and it caught me. I think it was on one of the videos of one of your keynotes that I was watching. It said, leave a legacy of care. How important is it to leave a legacy as a leader, as a leader of a family, leader of, again, sports team, business organization, whatever? What does it mean to leave a legacy?
I think that's it's different for everyone. It's defined. I think part of what you talk about, Joe, as far as the purpose point, it's like whatever your purpose is, if you fulfilled that through life and maybe have helped other people see and fulfill it, then you feel like you've left something behind. And I think legacy has a lot to do with like when I'm not around, whether not around from a positional perspective, not around from just on this planet perspective, what is left behind, and does it reflect any of the purpose that and then my mission in life. And so I think that's what legacy is all about.
And I think that's important. I think it's important to leave a legacy. And when you look back on what you did at a certain company or did for a certain person in helping them grow and progress and so forth, I heard somebody say it the other day that they want to be a positive footnote in people's lives. And so when people look back again 30 years from now, I was interviewing a guy the other day and he said the same thing. I said, what gives you the confidence in yourself to start a new business? Because he started and sold some businesses and so forth. He goes, well, I had 2 or 3 mentors when I first started out that really inspired me. Well, that was 30 years ago, and he's still talking about those 2 people and how they helped him in his journey through his business life and starting businesses and so forth. And to me, that's what we should want as a leader. We should want to leave a legacy that people, a positive, I want to say this too, a positive legacy, because some people leave a negative legacy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I always say this word authenticity, we use that word a lot. But if you're authentically a jerk, stop doing that. Like you have some work to do, right? And so that idea of like leaving a jerk, like a legacy of being a jerk, is not a positive thing to do.
So you have another statement I want to ask you. It says active listening is just one part of communication, but is the crucial part, is the difference between thinking we understand what people want and knowing what people want. Give me an example of active listening.
I mean, in that context, you're interacting with a customer. So I've worked in a sales capacity, I've worked in a customer experience capacity, I've worked as a manager for many, many years, and I've worked, employees. So just like leading down or being a consultant, right? And I think the key there is active listening in that context really is that we make a lot of assumptions. So we assume like the customer wants this, the prospect wants this, we assume the employee wants this, our board member wants this. We make a lot of assumptions. So when we make assumptions, well, you know what they say about assumptions. I'm not going to repeat that here.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we really reduce our effectiveness, and we also take away the power of the other person because we aren't allowing them to tell their side. And when we take away someone's power, they know it, they feel it. Who the heck wants to be around someone who takes away their power? Something to think about and to really like let base just sit there with it. So I
So,
think that when I think of that whole difference between thinking we know and knowing what we know, it's because our goal should be to get to the truth. And if we can get to the truth, we can solve for the pain at the truth point, not for our assumed whatever we assume the person's pain is. And pain, remember, is general. This is pain could be, again, in a sales context or a customer experience context, like pain could be the thing that separate that the difference between the product or the thing we're trying to sell them and the thing that they're having the issue with. That's kind of the pain point. And we're looking to be the gap filler as from the employee perspective. Like, what are they trying to get to? What kind of partnership do they want to see at work? From the board perspective, from the vendor perspective, from the right. So everybody at work, which is why I made this about a workplace listening book, not just for leaders, not just, it's for everybody that's interacting with your workplace. How well are they listening to the different stakeholders there? And how much are they guessing and assuming, or how much are they really knowing it by going deep and going down and going into the uncomfortable places to get to the thing they need to get to in order to solve for the thing? Because if you solve for the right thing, you keep them longer.
yeah,
If you solve for the short-term thing, you may get them and they leave because you didn't solve for the real thing.
right. Because you didn't
So
listen.
you didn't listen. You didn't listen in the way that you need to. So that's what, like I said, that's why I did, and is to create a framework for listening in a way that's complete. So, that's, yeah.
Now you do a lot of work, Heather, with culture. And you have one of your sayings is you want to have a culture of listening in a business. Two, how important is just overall culture, a positive culture, a culture where people want to be there, a culture where people are excited to come to work, people enjoy working with each other, and so forth. How do you build that? How do you establish that culture?
Well, I think the foundation of that is caring leadership, which is why I wrote the book on it, right? And why I did the research on it and to find out what care means. And I think if you have from the top down and all the way through in like the management ranks, if you have that sense of care by doing the behaviors that I talk about, right, then you're going to create a place where people want to stay. They're going to want to be there. You want to create a magnetic place where people aren't kind of kicked out by just your actions, your behaviors, or lack thereof, but they want to be with you because you've shown them that you care about them for more than just the job they're doing, but for who they are as humans, and just, just being there, being the humans on the planet. And so when listening is one of those components, because I feel like as I looked at all the 9 behaviors, it's a kind of a pivot point on all the sides. So it's like you can't, self-leadership isn't going to be great if you're not listening to yourself, if you aren't paying attention to the signs of yourself, if you aren't self-aware. The same thing's going to be for any of the other types of things that I look at with career leadership. If you can't create a safe space if people don't feel comfortable talking to you, and they're going to feel comfortable talking to you if you're not someone who's proven that you can listen well and that
Yeah.
you can act upon what you've heard. So like I said, it's the point at which everything else splinters off. So creating that culture and a positive culture is important, and it's critical whether you're a small business or whether you're a very, very big one, because it is the thing that keeps people there. Money's great, and yes, like some people do that for a little bit longer than they would because they need the money. But why do they want to stay? It's not why they have to stay. It's why do they want to stay is the question we should be asking ourselves.
That's a great point. And when I say this to a lot of leaders I work with, what's your mission statement? Because everyone has the mission statement. And a lot of them kind of don't know what their mission statement is, but it's hanging on the wall. And I said, well, you can't have that just hanging on the wall. It can't just be words on a wall. In fact, I like people to have a purpose statement instead of a mission statement, but that's another conversation. But my point to that is this: how hard is it for people to set? Well, it's kind of easy to say this is the culture I want to have in my business. These are the values that we're going to base it off of, and so forth. How hard is it for leaders to actually live it on a daily basis? Because I see a lot. I see a lot of mission statements and stuff on a wall, but I've not seen them lived day to day within the company or the organization.
Yeah, it's funny because I obviously am a consultant and a speaker, author, on kind of all the podcast shows, all the things. And sometimes I'll read comments and it'll be like the persnickety, like the little, it's not often, but like I'll get a survey that'll come from a speaking engagement, and there'll be like the one comment that'll say, well, this is good, but I didn't learn anything new. And I'm thinking, it's not about that you learn something new. It's about what you're going to go do with it. And do you do the thing
Right.
I'm talking about all the time?
Right.
Do you do it consistently? That's the key.
Yeah. And checks and balances. And how important is emotional intelligence with all of this?
I mean, I think it's critical. It's kind of the core of all of it, right? If we're not aware of ourselves, basically emotional intelligence is this idea of having self-awareness, being aware of who we are, how we are in the world, how we feel about things, how we represent ourselves in the world, self-awareness or social awareness, which is like what's happening in the world around us. How are other people feeling? How are our actions or the world's actions impacting those people? Being adaptable in an environment where change is rapid. How adaptable are you? So being a leader who is someone who's inspirational, uplifting. How well do you do that? And inspiring people to follow your vision. So there's these things that those are very, very, very critical. None of us are 100% on the mark with this, but we do need to get that part right, which is what those are the things that I try to highlight in the work I do. It's all the emotional intelligence versus the cognitive intelligence to do something.
So emotional intelligence can be improved,
Yes,
can grow, can
with
keep progressing.
intention, with intention.
Okay.
Because it's just everything I've talked about. There's just nothing that can be done unless you're intentional about the change. And in order to have a change be long lasting, you have to have an awareness of the change. You have to have desire to see the change. You have to have the stamina to see it through because it's not a one and done. It's not overnight.
Yeah. And it's also I think emotional intelligence for it to really work for you to get better at it, you have to care about people. Because if I don't care how Heather's feeling right now, then I'm not going to work on my emotional intelligence because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're not feeling good. I think where a lot of leaders go wrong is they make a decision and they have to understand that every decision they make usually affects somebody positively and somebody negatively. So if you and someone else are going for the promotion in our business and I pick you over that other person, what a lot of leaders are doing is they focus on you, the person who got it, because there's no conflict there. Everything's good in your world. And I can keep building everything's good in your world. So that means everything's good in my world. So I'm going to focus on you instead of going to the other person who didn't get the promotion and say, hey, you didn't get it this time, but this is the 3 things we're going to work on. We're going to coach you. We're going to help you. We love having you here. And they take care of the person that the decision focused on negatively. But I think what a lot of leaders do is they shy away from that piece of it. They lose that opportunity to help keeping that person who didn't get the promotion keep growing and progressing and learning and expanding themselves.
Absolutely. I think that's right. And so that caring leader is the one who's going to be expanding and uplifting and focusing on the advancement of other people and not them just themselves and what they can do in their career and what they need to do to meet their objectives and their programs and things like that.
So when we boil this all down, and you wrote the first book, The Art of Caring Leadership, and then you have the listening book, and then you have the 7 uh, intuitive laws of employee loyalty. All those things are kind of intertwined, and they kind of build off each other. They help each other. They support each other. So, like, active listening supports the caring leadership, and the caring leadership supports employee loyalty and so forth. I think they're all intertwined. How fun is it for you, Heather? How fun is it for you to go into a company or do a keynote speech and I call it the light bulb moment. I think us as leaders, one of our jobs is to make sure that you're doing more than what you thought you could even do, that the light bulb goes on and the light bulb keeps shining brighter. My job as a leader is to help coach you and guide you to do that, to keep growing, to keep progressing. How important is it for you as a person who's helping people do this with that part of what you do to turn those light bulbs on and people to go, oh man, I can't believe I didn't realize that, or I wasn't doing that. Now I do.
Yes, I love that part of the work I do. I mean, it's like to see that end result, either whether it's from a stage in a training session or just for like working with an executive team or working with the whole organization employees with listening sessions, is to see how much they see that they're valued or that their voices matter and that their leaders had a hand in it. I absolutely love being kind of the intermediary, the person that's behind the scenes, helping them all kind of look good to the people that are in the front that are doing the work to move the business forward. So I absolutely love it. Yeah, it's very good stuff. I'm definitely energized by it.
How much is a leader's job to motivate people?
Motivation is short-lived, I think, and so I don't really think that's the leader's job. Motivation is short-lived. It's more internal, and it's hard. That is very squishy. I think that we can inspire, and one of the books I want to give a shout out to is Stephen M. R. Covey's new book called Trust and Inspire, and it really is. I think it gets to a really important point that we are there, particularly as we look at emotional intelligence, is to be inspirational leaders. It's to have people think, like you said earlier, Joe, that the thing that they thought they couldn't do, they can do. We provide the support while they're there. We're a sounding board for them as they're on their journey. We open up the doors to make sure that the journey is as easy as it can be. That's where the compassionate action comes in. So I think that it's more of our job, and we should work to get better at being an inspirational leader than to being someone who motivates people.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, I think it's a challenge to motivate people, but I do think it's pretty easy and fun to inspire people to motivate themselves, so that they can own their motivation. But I can help inspire them to do that. It could be shown. I show a video of Kyle Maynard, who was born with no arms or legs, climbing up Mount Kilimanjaro. I should say crawling up Mount Kilimanjaro. It took him 11 days. Very inspiring to watch someone do that. So when I show somebody that, it might inspire them to think, man, I can do this. I can get over this. I can. If this guy can do it, then that's great. Real quick, 3 questions and we got to go. What's your purpose in life?
I would like to say, instead of purpose, it'd be calling. And that's because for me, my faith does drive me. And so I would say my calling is to make sure that people who thought they didn't previously have a voice, or that the voice wasn't important, to ensure them that it is, to help other people that have the power to make sure the voice is heard actually hear it. So that's my calling, is to do those 2 things.
And you're answering the call.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me. I skip over perspective. I go to passion. I think your purpose and passion sometimes equal each other. What's your passion in life?
Yeah. I like for people to feel like they're noticed. I want people around me to know that I've seen them. I want not one stone unturned as it relates to someone feeling like their humanity is being noticed. So
you're amazing. Your purpose and passion do equal each other. It's all about caring about people. Mm-hmm. You have such a ginormous heart for people. It's amazing to me. And I always say this, that your purpose and passion equal each other. What holds it together, the glue that holds it together, is your perspective on life. What's your perspective on life?
I would say the biggest thing is that I'm a super inclusive person. I want people to come into the circle, and I want to widen that circle. I don't want anybody to be excluded from the circle. I think that's the biggest thing. My perspective is like, how much more can we do together? And if we include more and we extend our arms to outside of a space we're normally at, how much more can we achieve? So I would say, let's open the circle.
It's awesome. Real quick, Heather, I know you got to go. How can people get a hold of you? Come do a keynote speech, get your books, get inspired by you. How can they get a hold of you?
I would say if you go to LinkedIn, I do a lot of stuff there. So looking for Heather Younger on LinkedIn is probably a big one. And then other than that, you can go, I have 2 different websites. I have heatheryounger.com and then employeefanatics.com. So it depends on whether you want consulting and training or whether you want speaking. So that's where you'd go to either one of those for that.
Dynamic keynote speaker. I will tell you that. I've watched some clips of her speaking, and it just inspired me so much just to watch those little clips. Heather, thank you so much for coming on and talking leadership, but your care for people is what drives this. Your care for people to be happy to go to work, to come home happy, to leave the next morning happy, to the light bulbs go on so they can keep growing and progressing. The work you're doing is helping so many people do that. You're an amazing person, and I so appreciate you coming on the People Progressing podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you for listening. And if there's anything that I can do for you, you can get on Coach Joe White 97 Consulting and Coach Joe White 97 at gmail.com. And thank you so much for listening to this week's edition. Very, very powerful from Heather. keep progressing and keep having fun in life. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.